If there was ever a boost that could create a happiness again in the ranks of the clergy, is precisely that one of them, one of their own, has been raised to the dignity of the altars, as they say, and namely the first step being beatification. So I look upon this beatification coming up now as a sign from on heaven that our priests have to see that God is with them. In the most difficult times, He's there. When we think that God is more distant than ever, He's there. And a sign from on high is that one of the diocesan priests of the United States of America, and then specifically of our Archdiocese of Hartford, is being raised up as a model not only for Christian sanctity and Christian holiness, but in a specific way to the priests of the America, of the Archdiocese, and of the world. And that's the way I look at it, and that's the reason I have such great joy in the forthcoming beatification.
It's an exciting moment for so many, the upcoming beatification, and one that's been decades in the making. Sure, plenty of people had a feeling that Father McGivney was a really holy guy, but for him to be beatified, to show that a man like this parish priest from the little state of Connecticut was worthy of such veneration, well, that takes some proof, and it takes some effort. Along with the Archdiocese of Hartford, it was the Knights of Columbus, the organization Father McGivney had started, who set out to show what a heroic and holy man their founder was.
The story was that I became Archbishop of Hartford in 1992. And I think it may have been around, well, very shortly after I got here, but eventually it was in 1997, I think, if I'm not mistaken. But very shortly after I got here, the Supreme Knight, who at that time was Virgil Decant, said that he was interested in having the cause of Father McGivney introduced, and would I, as the ordinary of Hartford, be willing to support that desire on his part? And I said, sure, absolutely, because it was very becoming at that particular time, even more so later. But in any event, I said I'd do whatever I could to help him.
And God bless Monsignor Bevins, who many years ago in 1997, when Archbishop Cronin started the prayers for the canonization of Father McGivney and opened the cause for his beatification, this parish has always prayed that prayer. God our Father, defender of the poor and helper of the widow and orphan. And we've prayed that prayer for his beatification. So this is just very close to us. It's very intimate. It's one of your own. And so there's a great love for Father McGivney here at the Basilica.
And so we started praying after every Mass here for the beatification and canonization of Father McGivney. And I encourage the people, if they got answers to their petitions, to please notify the Guild, because it was important for them for Rome to know that the cult was active and productive. And so every opportunity that we had, whether with the Knights of Columbus or with the Ladies Guild or with the children in St. Mary's School, they said the prayer for the canonization of Father McGivney every day too. So we were promoting the cause here every way that we could.
Well, it turns out that there was a new protocol just about that time. And that's why I referred a moment ago to I think 1997. And the new protocol was that no cause could be sent to Rome that had not previously been put by the ordinary of the diocese before the whole Conference of Bishops. And that had never been a requirement prior to this. So anyway, you had to have the agreement of the Conference of Bishops that it would be okay. So anyway, I did that. I don't know if I was the first. I think I may have been the second case. But anyway, at the November meeting in that year, I went before the Conference of Bishops and presented the case purely that we were interested in bringing forth to the Holy See the life and ministry and the work that Father McGivney had done, all of which seemed to be so very, very holy and very good and quite pastoral. I did it, and the Conference of Bishops, the plenary body, gave a unanimous agreement. So I was very happy at that, and the Knights of Columbus were very happy, and certainly Mr. Decken was very happy.
I was rooting for him in order to give some encouragement and say you are of the fabric of a saint. You are in the company of a saint.
There was a postulator appointed, namely Father Gabriel O'Donnell. And then nature took its course. At some point, all the papers and documentation were gathered together and packaged. That's the history of the whole cause, the history of Father McGivney, the whole question of the requirements that the congregation had stipulated. Everything was done, all wrapped up and shipped to Rome. Now, each page of that had to be initialed by Monsignor Thomas Ginty, who was at the time Chancellor at the time, and every single one of those pages was initialed. Then it had to be wrapped and sealed in sealing wax, and the ring that would put the seal of the diocese in it was this ring here, this very ring, and I put all the thing in it that says the seal in it. It's a kind of a signet ring, and it was shipped off to Rome.
When Mother Seton was beatified, I said to myself, now we can get Father McGivney beatified because we have a native-born American who was beatified. And of course, the Knights of Columbus then picked up, not anything from me, but they picked up the same thing. And in talking with Father Gabriel, who was the promoter of the cause at the time, he stressed the fact that the numbers in the cult were very important.
It's amazing to think, and I don't think Father McGivney himself, if you would have told him back in the day that his organization that he started here as a local effort initially was going to grow to be an organization of 2+ million men worldwide in multiple countries and so forth. But that's a tribute to his humility. But nonetheless, it shows something about the timelessness of the vision that Father McGivney had, that now for 100+ years, again, in states that are so different from each other, and countries that are so different even from the United States.
In 2003, I retired, and so therefore my successor, Archbishop Mansell, took over. And then, as a matter of fact, in due course, Mr. Decken was replaced by the new Supreme Knight, who was Carl Anderson, and Carl himself is still the Supreme Knight, and he took the whole thing over. And the Knights in general have been terribly, terribly involved in this thing from the point of view of emotion. I mean, it means a lot to them, and with very, very good reason.
There's this resonance of the need for men, Catholic men, to gather together, to support each other in fraternity, and to be vehicles of charity. And maybe we don't have today, widows having children torn from their families by the state, but the needs of today, while different, are just as pressing. And I think that's a characteristic you see in the Knights, that whenever there's a need, they respond. The natural disasters we've recently had, the hurricanes hitting and so forth, it seems almost immediately Knights councils are gathering together and they're volunteering their time and they're collecting money and they're collecting supplies and they're doing the work. So whether it's a local need like that or whether it's our brothers and sisters in the Christians in the Middle East who are being persecuted and even martyred for their faith, for the Knights as a collective whole to respond, to see that and say, we can do something about this, and we're going to mobilize men and mobilize efforts and mobilize money to address this pressing need. So the vision continues, and I think that for as long as we have life on this earth, that there's going to be the kind of a need that the Knights address.
At a certain point then, we get the news that the miracle that ultimately was accepted, had been accepted, and that Father McGivney, who had already been declared servant of God because his heroic life had been recognized by the Holy See and the Holy Father, that the Holy Father had now accepted the miracle, and Father McGivney was well on his way to beatification, which, as we know, is going to take place this October 31st.
The announcement of Father McGivney's beatification was an answer to countless prayers and has provided an opportunity for a clear message to shine through. This man was a parish priest who simply wanted to be a priest and did everything he did to minister to his people and increase his ability to do that well. What an example he was throughout his life. What an example he has been for priests since his death in 1890, and what an example he continues to be and offer for priests today.
Priests are going to be inspired by his life, knowing that his heroic virtue, his life of holiness, we can all aspire to. And when the priest is living that life passionately, it elevates everybody. The people too can share in that. There is here in Waterbury a great love and a great devotion for Father McGivney, and I think this is only the beginning. I think the best, I believe the best in Waterbury and in many ways in the Archdiocese is yet to come. And much of that I think will be due to the prayers and example of a life well lived by Father McGivney.
To look at the priesthood of Father McGivney as a priest is something both wonderful and at times terrifying in the good sense of that word, in that it sets such a high bar of what saintly priestly ministry is like, that I can look to that, and I do look to that and be inspired by it. You know, sometimes late at night when I'm just locking up the church for the evening, you know, I'll just walk by the tomb and put my hand on it, you know, and say a little prayer, and it's usually, you know, Father McGivney, help me to serve these people the way you served yours. I mean, so this, you know, so when your eyes are fixed on a saint, or blessed, at the very least, we'll say blessed, it does kind of call to mind your own shortcomings, but at the same time, it's a source of inspiration and it's a source of hope and the sense of help that I've never felt alone. From the first day I arrived here as pastor, I've never felt like I'm doing this task alone, that I have this unseen by human eyes friend and mentor and guide and intercessor who is helping me in my own ministry to the people of New Haven today.
Well, I think our priests, all priests, but you know, in our archdiocese too, they need to, and I say we, because I include myself, we need to get back to some of the basics about the priestly life, about the daily application of ourselves generously to ministering among the people, and being available to people, and being very dedicated to our priestly identity and our priestly life and the obligations of our office. You know, again, it's been said many times, but it's true that without a real sense of holiness, of the pursuit of holiness, the priesthood is not going to be fruitful, and people are not going to be drawn to it or even respect it. And of course, I don't need to tell you the great challenges that have arisen in recent times about the integrity of the priesthood. And but you know, nonetheless, I've known so many wonderful priests in my life, and And by far the vast majority of our priests are very dedicated and hardworking. And we somehow have to not get discouraged or lose sight of the fundamental ideals of the priesthood and what we're called to be every day.
But from my point of view, I knew how much it would mean to parish priests in America. I knew that I could see that for the Vatican to honor Father McGivney was also to give a vote of approval for the future of the parish priests in America.
Priests need to tell his story. The Knights of Columbus is certainly telling his story. We will encourage prayers to him for his intercession. And I think the rest will just take over. That he will become almost like a household name. People praying to him for intercession for so many things. That's what I think is going to happen. And it'll likely start here. When I say here, I mean in the Archdiocese. And then God only knows from there throughout the world. He may become another great, as we have over our altar, St. Augustine or St. Catherine of Siena. He may become that well known because he had a passion for the working, average, ordinary person. And as the Bible says, all things are possible with God.
Everyone's very excited. It doesn't happen. The whole Archdiocese is very happy, very excited about it. The state, obviously, the country, and the whole church. And hopefully his example will inspire many young men to not only join the priesthood, but also be creative and bring Christ in a different way, new light to millions of people. We never know how this what the effect will be as his devotion really grows and continues to grow here in the Archdiocese of Hartford.
He's a native of our diocese, and if anybody should be involved in the appreciation of what is being accomplished by raising him to the level of a beatus, a blessed, I think it's we who are here. And you can hear about all the different saints that have been made over the years, and particularly in this day and age now, where we live in a period when Pope John Paul II was so generous in raising the modern saints to the altars, and with reason, because you can think in terms of somebody living in the 4th or 5th century. Today, the Feast of St. Jerome, for instance, is okay, but a marvelous saint for the scriptures, but he lived a long while ago. You can't relate to Jerome too much, but when you know the new blessed is was living down the street in New Haven or up in Thomaston as a pastor, that makes an awful lot more sense, and I think it's a very good thing that we have a modern priest, and relatively speaking, he is a modern priest, as one of our own, and who is now a blessed. I think it's a great thing.
Truly one of our own. And that's true for our priests, but also for so many others. Any of us, all of us, can find ways to connect with the faith and action put into practice by Father McGivney, which is why he can be a model for our whole church and provides a message to the men and women who are a part of it.
Christ is counting on you, and he's counting on you now. It's not, well, someday when you're older, or when you're more mature in your faith or whatever. No, Christ is calling you right now, and you can do great things. By God's power, not our own, but by God's power, you can do extraordinary things in your families, in your communities, in your parishes, in our church and our society right now, because God is giving you whatever gifts you need to accomplish right now the great thing that he's calling you to. And everyone's called in some way or another to greatness.
Very often today we see conversions at different times of life, 20s, 30s, 40s later. But Father McGivney was an inspiration from the beginning. And I think our young people especially need to know that it's possible, that we don't have to drift first and then come back, that we can actually embrace a life of faith from our earliest days. And whether we had lived to 100 years old or like Father McGivney, 38, living a life of Christ is possible from the beginning, and it always brings joy.
People kind of feel that they always will get a hearing, always will get some support from a priest. Well, when that priest has been beatified, it's even more indicative that the people of God will go to Blessed Father Michael McGivney and say what their problem is and ask for his intercession, heavenly intercession before the throne of God. So I see a great devotion to a local saint developing, and in fact I encourage it. After all, he's right around the corner, right down in New Haven.
I think to give young men a kind of a template for what it was to be a husband and father within the boundaries of the church, but not in the church. What is it to be a husband and father? Some people don't realize that before Father McGivney came along, well, there was a wide range of what it meant to be a husband and father. I really think the Knights of Columbus had a lot of influence about you are obligated to your wife and children, spiritually and financially. That was pretty radical thought for back then. It's kind of common now. So you are absolutely right that he was all about that, families, and I think we don't know how much stability he lent this whole country because of that.
What's memorable to me is it's kind of personal, because I'm born here in Waterbury, not too far from where Father McGivney lived. So what's precious to me is just to know that a saintly man walked these streets. The streets that I grew up on, the streets that so many of us did, the streets that we're familiar with. And that it is possible in the most simple of settings to also become a saint, to follow in his footsteps, who of course followed in the steps of Christ. I think I think his childhood is most precious to me. I think it's wonderful, of course, the Knights of Columbus and so many things that have came from his life of faith, but it all started here. And we all have a beginning in our spiritual life. I think that's what's most precious to me, that it started here and that everyone has this great possibility of living a deeply spiritual life wherever their surroundings are as a child.
Oh, well, I talk to him all the time. I believe that in the of course, and I know you know this and mean it, but those who've gone before us, we're in the communion of saints. That is to say, those who are in heaven, those who are still in purgatory, being purified, and those of us on earth. That's the communion of saints. And so, yes, I pray to Father McGivney every day. I ask him to intercede for our Archdiocese and all the many things that are on my mind as the Archbishop, and I would encourage that very much.
I would hope to think that people who come to know him realize that he really walks with you, really, if I could say counsels, if you just open your mind, open your heart, and try to think about him a bit. He was then and is now one charismatic figure for Connecticut or for the rest of us.
A kid from Waterbury, a holy priest, the founder of the Knights, there are plenty of ways to describe Father McGivney. But however you look at him, you find a man who loved God, loved his parishioners, and was ready to do any and everything to serve them well. When it comes down to it, the care he offered, the charity he pursued, the prayerful but very real way he approached everything are such examples of how each of us can live our own Christian lives. Hopefully then, we will all have the courage to live as Father McGivney did and look for guidance and intercession from this incredible priest of Connecticut.